Hey there, Smite fans, and welcome into the final regular season edition of SPL Waiting Room for Season 7. Weird, right? It's been an incredibly long phase. Let's call a spade here. This phase has gone on for a long time. Each team will have played every other team 3 times at the end of this weekend, and that makes for a long phase, no doubt about it. But it doesn't mean that these games haven't been exciting and important all the way through, and that continues to this very week, to the next game that you will see. There's tons of clinching scenarios that we have here this week for seeding. Some teams are locked, some teams can still move. Let's take a look real quick at where these teams are and where they can end up. Now, the big game of the week, of course, is Renegades United, because it's real simple there. Winner gets 6th seed, and top 6 is important because only the top 6 go to the Phase 2 playoffs. The other teams that can move are 3rd and 4th seed for Sanguine Radiance. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but it is, because even though they'll end up in the same bracket, 3rd, 4th, so to speak, 3rd, 4th will have a better opportunity to make it to the end of Phase 2 playoffs, and that is critical. Don't forget that the winner of Phase 2 playoffs is your number 1 seed at Worlds. End of story. Even if United, let's say, upsets Renegades today, then goes on to playoffs and has a miracle run through, wins the finals, they are your number 1 seed at Worlds. So making it to the playoffs, absolutely critical. We're going to devote all day long to talking about some of these clinching scenarios and, of course, who we think could and will perform at those playoffs. But first, we've got to recap week number 13. And to do that, we've got Finch and Dave, as told by Dave and Finch.
Welcome in for another episode of the SPL Weekly Recap with Finch and Dave. Now, you all know how this works by this point. We write these scripts for each other, then read them for the very first time here as part of this broadcast. Thanks for watching. We'll jump right on into it. Week 13 is another 7-set week, and also the second to last weekend in the season of the SPL. Started with one of the most anticipated matchups in recent memory, Ghost versus Space Station. Now, Ghost entered this matchup fresh off of a loss to PK, but had won 7 straight before that. And Space Station were on a 3-set win streak. This matchup would end up falling a bit flat as Ghost crushed SSG 2-0.
That's right, thanks Finch. The second set on Friday was a battle of the constantly shifting 3rd and 4th seeds. PK and Sanguine both seem to have improved greatly lately, so the question was whose improvement would prove improved enough. After an exciting back and forth set, we got our answer. Sanguine, to the tune of a 2-1 win.
All right, to start off Saturday, the 2 teams at the bottom of the standings would battle it out with important seeding implications. E-United and Obey have juggled sets against one another this phase, and this set, it's no different. E-United may feel as if they should have gotten the clean 2-0, but it ends up going all 3. Luckily for Baskin and the boys, that's a catchy name, E-United get the win in 3 nonetheless. Maybe they should go by that at some point.
Radiance and Renegades battled it out to end the day on Saturday. Radiance seemed to be back on track after a couple of wins. Meanwhile, Renegades still seem to be struggling with closing out games. Neither of those trends would change on Saturday as Radiance continued to win and Renegades continued to dissolve after the 21-minute mark.
This team was destroying opponents for weeks. 2-0 Ghost, but then they lose to Sanguine 2-1 and E-United 2-0 in the same weekend. E-United continue to heat up, continue to put leverage on solo, and continue to find wins.
That's right, the first of our regularly scheduled games saw 2 win streaks collide as Ghost took on Sanguine. Only one could maintain, and I think the wise money would have been on Ghost. It turns out it was, as 2 strong performances from the league's best team earned a 2-0 victory. I'm going to keep on going as SSG and Radiance close out the last supersized SPL day of the year, and they close it out in dramatic fashion. SSG are now tied with Ghost for the top of the league, but Radiance come in seemingly having regained their footing. That footing would prove to be solid as they found a surprising 2-0 victory. So that's it, that's all, and that's that for this weekend in the SPL. One final weekend of SMITEPro League action here in Season 7 before we get to the playoffs, before we get to placements, before we get to Worlds. Should be a blast to watch. We'll see you there.
Thank you very much, as always, to Dave and Finch and Dave. I think I just have to legally, that's part of like the branding of that segment, switch it every single time. But we don't have to switch this one because it's just Gormizer and John Finch joining us here on the waiting room this week. Gentlemen, we are at the finish line. We have arrived at the very end of phase number 2, and it's time to start talking about which of these teams we think can make a real run at playoffs. So we're going to do a very solid, segment that every sport does across every single esport and traditional sport, the old contenders or pretenders segment here. Let's start off with Gore Miser here. Gore, who do you think is a team that could be a real contender or a real pretender?
I'm actually looking at the Knights here, and this is something, coming in, they're not necessarily the highest in the standings, right? Radiance recently kind of having their resurgence, Sanguine, where they are. You've seen the Knights kind of get bumped down, but this is also the same time last year they were starting to pop off, so I'm looking at them as a real contender this time around. And it's also because of some of these other facts. I mean, when you look at their entire phase, they're pretty much 50-50 with all of their games. I think they have 22 wins, 21 losses. And so it is a little bit of a toss-up as to what you're going to get, except a lot of those wins were in these last few weeks. I mean, they had that incredibly long streak of wins that ended up getting ended by Radiance, but then they 2-0'd Ghost right afterwards. So there's some question marks, I think, that come through. They are the only team outside of Ghost that has been able to take down SSG. I can't say regularly just yet. We'll have to see if they can maybe maintain that by finding themselves, I guess, in the right bracket standings that come through. But they've also been able to take down Ghost in the past. I just think they've shown that capability to pretty easily and handily take it to these top 2 teams that we have honestly kind of treated as infallible at this point. And because of that, they have to be favored as someone that can go and break through this bracket.
I think that's an interesting perspective, especially considering their most recent loss was to this United team that isn't even there quite yet. But I think your point that they play well against the top 2 is a really good one. Finch, do you have a different contender in mind for the Phase 2 playoffs?
I do, and I respect Gore's opinions, but I'm going to make the argument here for Sanguine as a contender. A really great way to make the argument is go back and look at those PK clips. Sanguine were popping off in the background of all of those clips. Listen, these guys have evolved here at this stage in the game of the season. I know that it looks a bit like they've been getting squeezed lately, but that pressure is how you get diamonds, right? They have become now Sanguine that still has their late game of old, but they've added in this new early game layer, right? We've seen things like Wrong You on this Hercules pick out of the support role, or maybe even giving Panatom something like the Erlong Shen so that he can enact the game or affect the game much earlier on. I think this new version of Sanguine, this Goldilocks just right version of them, now with more early game and still the same late game, are going to be a really tough matchup for the top end of the league. I gotta be honest, they have struggled up against SSG and Ghost, but Sanguine are the type of team that I trust to come in and play the best picks very, very well, rely on their teamwork, and then find some upsets. I'm hype on these Sanguine boys.
I think it's hard to disagree with the Sanguine hype because they've looked pretty good, again, except for up against Ghost and SSG.
Yes. But
a lot of teams have not looked good against everybody else, it's felt like. Gore, who do you think might be a bit of a pretender going into Phase 2 playoffs?
Now this one's a little hot, I think, to handle when it comes through, but I'm actually leaning towards Radiance as someone that they're just so wildly inconsistent to me that I have to throw them as someone that I don't know if they're going to be able to show up on that week, right? I don't know if that's going to be the time that they step forward and make the big differences. And I was just looking at it. They've played 49 games. Let's round it up to 50, let's say. Half of those have been, or more than half of those, 33 of them, they've played from first pick. And we had talked about this a few weeks ago, but their win rate on the Order side versus the Chaos side is weirdly astronomically different. Like, it's a few percentages apart that comes through. And so that's really what I'm looking at, is this team is inconsistent as a whole. I feel like I've been harping on them a lot lately, but even though they've had a recent resurgence here in regular play, I think we are seeing some teams maybe pocket some things to wait for playoffs. We know how important it is. First place, being able to go just straight to Worlds is going to be amazing for them. And so I think that even though they're slightly rising now, they just haven't proven themselves to be concrete enough to really win.
I think that's fair with this Radiant squad. It's been a crazy ride since they had to take that break. Still haven't quite gotten off quite yet. Finch, how about for you? Which one of these teams feels more like a pretender to you?
Well, I'm going to say E United here. By saying that, I'm both backing them up, assuming they'll win against Renegades later on today and then make it to playoffs, but also I have my misgivings about this team, right? Because their right side of the map for me is one of the most right side of the map inconsistent teams in the whole league, right? I'm talking about Scream and Bastion. I got to make sure I say at the top of this that both of them have obviously shown us that they could individually carry games at any given moment, but I don't think here in this season, forget the past, we've seen it consistently enough from either one of them, and that is something I'm worried that could potentially be a bit of a weight for this team later on. Snoopy is playing some of the best Smite we've seen from him since like Season 1 and 2, but I don't know that that's going to be enough. Then you factor in that sometimes Heroine's God Pool is a little bit erratic, and that he's not playing quite all the same pick as everyone else, and then I find myself a little bit doubtful. I know a lot of people are high up on this squad. They love cheering for Hurry and Baskin and the rest of the boys, but I'm just not quite there yet. We're going to see them be a little bit more consistent before I can put my vote behind them.
Makes sense to me. Got to earn their way there first, too, which is not
Right.
necessarily going to be easy up against this Renegade squad, but we'll see that a little bit later on today. Time now here on the waiting room for everybody's favorite Gore Miser-centric segment. It's Fact Seat Gaming. So allow me to take a back seat so that Gore can bring the fact seat.
Well, I'm actually interested. I wrote all these facts, well, actually, just yesterday for this one. I tweet out a ton of them, right? And I actually think that the third one you'll see is something I had to steal from my Twitter because I was running out of stuff to scrape through that came through. And I'm really interested as to what this first one was worded as because I realized that I sent it in as just a statement. So here we go. What is Yamoja's win rate when she is first pick? And I'll also give you a bonus if you can just give this. This is all the way, by the way, all year when she's first pick. But a bonus or maybe, I guess, supplemental point if you can just say what her win rate is all year in general.
I'm going to go with something high because I think Yamoja is good. That's the limb I'm going to stand on.
She is good.
I'm going to say 67%. No, that's way too high. That's way too high. 62% is what I'm going to go with. 62.
Yeah. No, Yamoja's really good. I'm not afraid to go a little bit higher. Listen, dude, the problem is that sometimes Yamoja gets first picked by teams that are struggling. I'm willing to jump out a bit further, drop a little 72 for the boys. Yeah,
Wow.
Gore, is that exactly it?
Well, see, this is the interesting thing. I chose it because the number would surprise you, but first pick all year, she's been 46%. Any team that is first picked her, she's actually losing more in that first pick spot, and as opposed to where she is. Overall, her win rate, though, is still positive 57%, so she is still doing really well.
Okay.
It's just, as you had highlighted, Aggro, a couple of those teams that have first picked her maybe didn't play her to her full potential, and so that maybe dropped it just a little bit. Either way, she is someone that we have talked about a lot. We have a lot of top bans in the league. 3 of the 5 of them are Yamoja, who's at number 1, Persephone, who's at number 2, and then Hercules, who is actually the number 4 most banned god all year. And that's not really that surprising. All 3 of those gods are impact players. We see them all the time. But who do you think the other 2 are? Because I didn't realize that these 2 were included in this, and it kind of blew my mind.
Interesting. This one's
this is
hard.
all year. Yeah.
I don't think people were banning like Rom and Cupid back then, right?
Remember
No, they
Phase
weren't.
1, that's the key. Phase 1 had one of these gods as just a huge player.
Erlong
Freya.
Shen's my guess. Oh, Freya's a good one.
Freya?
Erlong Shen or...
Not Freya?
Not Freya.
Man, who was OP
Or-
in Phase 1? I can't even remember.
It's got to be like
I
a
want-
in the before
jungler?
time.
Yeah, in the
Yes.
before time.
Well, sorta, kinda.
Oh,
Ooh, that's a good hint.
that is a good.
I don't know.
I don't know
I
either.
really don't. I want to say Sobek because I feel like he gets banned a lot, but
Man, now
I don't
gotta
think
pull
that
up.
he's going to be top 5.
I was gonna say Erlong and Unbots, but Unbots is just a jungler, right? That doesn't fit the build, perhaps. Achilles is my other guess. Achilles.
Ooh.
Well,
People
I'm
have
going to
been
have
banning Achilles back in
to
Phase
to break it to you. Number 3 is actually Camazotz that
Of
comes through.
course.
Dominated
Oh, right.
a lot of the bans in Phase 1. And the one that caught me off guard, I didn't expect to see him, but Thor was up there.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's
right
just
after his changes,
Thor
he was
being
real
Thor.
good, huh?
Yeah, he was real
now,
good
just
for a
because
while.
I brought it up. Aphrodite, Freya, Hel, Oleron, and Amaterasu are the next 5. So there's your top 10. that
Okay, you
come
had one
through
that was in
the
there with
year-long
I had 1.
bans.
That's not very impressive. Yeah, that's kind of embarrassing. But okay, all right. I'm redeeming myself here. Let's go.
All right. So, and this is the one that was pulled from Twitter. So maybe you know it, maybe you don't. There are 2 games
I got it.
so
You
far
gotta let
where
Aggro
Yamoja has been picked after the second ban phase, meaning she made it through 10 bans and 6 picks, math, and still was available for everybody. So what team got her both times, and what was their result?
Which
I
team
know
got
this one.
Yamoja bottom 2? I want to say it's like Sanguine, but there's no way Ronnie got it bottom 2. That seems like that shouldn't be allowed if that's what happened.
I don't think anyone should get
Well,
it
what
bottom
happened
2.
is
That's
even less
ridiculous to
allowed,
me.
if I'm being honest here.
Even less allowed? Would it be? Okay, I don't know. Is it who's
It
worse
was
than Ronnie?
SSG, right, Gore? It was Rapper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man.
They
Yeah,
won
that
both
makes
of them.
sense.
I wish
Yep.
it was more interesting. One was, I thought it was going to be like, and they did it both on the Chaos side. She was 10th pick, but it's not. They once got her on Order, once got her on Chaos. And just for some reason in those 2 games they went through there, I was actually having to go through, because she was counted wrong. I had like 3 different numbers for Yamoja across 2 spreadsheets, and I had to go find it. So I was looking at every single game, and I'm like, wait a minute. Who bottom 2's Yamoja? And they just let her open. And Raffer's just, at that point,
Gotta
I think
ban Dardas,
it's
dude.
illegal not to play for that. So lucky for them, I guess, being able to pick her up that low.
Yeah, I can think of a couple reasons why that happened. Aphrodite, Hera, Erlong
Yeah.
Shen, Amaterasu. Like, that's
Those are some good
probably
ones.
why.
Four
we
pretty
saw that
solid
happen.
reasons.
Yeah, those are some pretty good ones. Thank you, Goran Finch, for playing along there for Fact Seat Gaming. We've got to take a quick break here on the waiting room. When we come back, we'll be talking about some of these clinching scenarios once again and who we think will be going to the Phase 2 playoffs.
Well, Dardas, I didn't realize that I might be revealing like trade secrets here that coming through, but I'm gonna have to ask you, when exactly in the middle of a fight are you the one that wants to drop it? Are you kind of in a similar mindset as these two, going for the carries mainly, or are there any other scenarios where Argus is gonna be game changing?
Well, like Harry said, like sometimes you wanna drop it on the jungler, right? I think it depends. Like if my team is fine with me not doing if they don't need me to kill their carries, usually I'll go for the jungle, or vice versa. So it depends on my team. Usually when you're behind, you loot for the flanks. That's usually what happens. I loot for the flank, and if I drop Argus on the carries, like Harry previously said, if you drop Argus on the mage is not gonna kill it. So the ADC has to peel for him. So they're both gonna be grouped up, and that's when you literally use everything on them because they're grouped up. So yeah, usually on carries and maybe on jungle sometimes. And you could use it for tanks. If your ADC is really fed and he's gonna carry the game, you're just here to CC for him, okay? You're just playing support for him. So you could use Argus on tanks sometimes.
Make sure you guys check out that episode of Grand Masterclass featuring Hera. I know that Dave has had that on repeat since
Yeah.
it went live, so I'm sure the viewer numbers are spiked a little bit. Don't be alarmed. It's all Dave Olson sitting in his bedroom watching that every single time. Let's talk about this week here, fellas, because Week 14 is a big one. We're starting off pretty hot with this really, really critical E-United and Renegade set, but that's not the only set that's going to matter here this week. Radiance and Sanguine are both teams that need to be worried about their performances here this week. So if Sanguine can beat Obey on Saturday, then they are locked for 3rd seed. If they lose that, then Radiance needs to win at least 1 game, I believe, in order to move on into that 3rd seed. But they've got some pretty tough competition in Ghost and in PK. Think the big key, though, are these teams going to play anything different? Probably not. In those matches that aren't going to move the standings, we probably won't see a whole lot of new stuff there, Finch.
Yeah, I'm not thinking so either, Agro. I've had a little bit of a chance, to kind of hear from some of these players, and I don't think they want to tip any part of their hand in these matches, even with how important they are. Now, maybe in the ones like the United Renegades you talked about before, we'll see it, but I doubt it in some of the other ones.
So here is the overall look at what the SPL standings can look like at the end of this week. If they have a star, they're locked. So Ghost, SSG, PK, and Obey Alliance will not be moving no matter what this week. But Sanguine can lock in to 3rd with a win overall against Obey. Radiance need Sanguine to lose and then get a win. And then Renegades and United, theirs is pretty simple. Win and you're in to that 6th seed. And that's where I want to really focus the rest of the show, is who we think is going to come out on top between these two squads. Finch, I know that you called E-United a potential pretender once they make it to Phase 2 playoffs, but what makes you think they will be making it to Phase 2 playoffs?
I think they'll be able to get an edge in this matchup, right? United have so much player skill to me that even though there have been some times when I thought they've been a little bit out of sync in the way they go about their late game or some of that decision making, that I'm not sure it's going to come up. And listen, I've kind of done him a disservice already by not just mentioning his name as soon as you allowed me to speak, but Snoopy's playing lights out right now. Have you seen anyone put in better efforts in losing games than what Snoopy has been doing? As long as that man continues to play the way that he does, that United truly do always have have a shot, and that does give me a little bit of, comfort in what they might be able to do here to be able to try to find this win, though I do think Renegades have been playing a little bit too inconsistently to be able to beat United.
And Gore, it's worth mentioning that the last time these two teams went up against one another was right after the roster swap, a grudge match for variety, as some were putting it. And it was still an United win, 2-1, but that was in the very beginning of the honeymoon phase of this new roster. Do you think the Renegades have learned enough from this in order to find a win?
Honestly, I think they're in a position where they can give them a lot of trouble. I think we've definitely seen the Renegades start to meld a little bit better. When they first picked up Variety, it was still kind of like a trip of, okay, who's going to I don't even want to use the term power struggle, but just kind of who's going to play what, how are we going to make this work, all of that fun stuff to make sure that the team melds together. The problem is I think that overall, and much like Finch had said, we're seeing much higher consistent performances out of, let's say, Hurwind and Snoopy than we're really getting to see out of Vin and Barra. I think both Vin and Barra have an insanely high ceiling. The same thing can be said for Variety as well as Lasbra. But their floor and how often they're jumping between the two are really the things that are causing me to want to vote and shy away against them. Because even though they've performed well in the past, they've not been doing it consistently enough, especially compared to what United's been able to accomplish, to really vote on them and lean on them. I do still think they're going to give them a run for their money, but I don't think they can pull it out.
Not a great sign for Renegades when their highlights against the United were from Solar Troll's perspective. It's not him there anymore. It's Variety, so they're going to need Variety to reprise some of what Solar Troll did in that set. Let's take a look at our overall predictions for this week in order to see how we are all feeling, because I agree with what you guys seem to be saying in that I feel like United should be the ones who should be able to get the edge here today. But with Renegades, that's the thing about them. You never really know exactly what's going to happen because they've shown that ability to stay red hot. So all of us feeling like United are going to be the victors here today. Working on getting those predictions for you in just a little bit. But guys, you remember the other big game of the week, assuming Sanguine takes care of business, is Sanguine Obey. Anyone siding with Mifflin here this week, or are we feeling like Sanguine's going to lock up the third seed?
No, you can't put me in that camp over there with him. I'm taking Sanguine, baby. I mean, Obey are locked at this point, right? I don't know if they have quite as much to fight for as everyone else. I think I feel pretty good going with Sanguine.
The only thing in my mind that could fuel Obey right now, at least the only thing that I would want to fuel, is that if they lose both sets, don't they? Yeah, they think they play 2 this week. Yeah, once today against the Knights and then once against Sanguine. If they lose both of those, then they're tied with United for the longest loss streak in Phase 2, because they're at 8 losses right now. And so if they lose it, they can only hit 10. So the good news is they can't take the crown away from United. But the bad news is you can still tie that. 10 losses in a row is not great. I think that would give me some fuel to try and fight. But when you're looking against them against someone like Sanguine, I don't know if that's necessary. Like, you're punching way, way beyond your class at that point, at least from what we've seen out of consistency. I will say their first 15 minutes, though, of every game has gotten way better, and that's awesome to see.
It has been, and we'll see if they can turn it around this week. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to bring you the beautiful predictions graphic. I'll try and post that on Twitter so you can see all of our votes and who's going to win by following my picks, of course, overall. But not John Finch's, even though he has the highest percentage. Percentage is just luck. Yeah. Look, I am going to get...
Yeah, just overtime,
Right, over a very long, feels like an eternity phase. He's been very, very lucky. Yeah, since July we've been going. And we have finally reached the finish line here for phase number 2. Going to be a great week to wrap up our SPL. So thanks so much for tuning in the waiting room. Thanks to Gore and Finch for dropping by and finishing off the regular season in style. And we hope that the SPL teams can do the same. I think we're feeling pretty good about it. Don't worry, everyone. SPL starting right now.